Okay, we're trying a whole different kind of video today, something I have never ever done, and we're going to see how it goes. I'm editing this in a different way than I've ever edited a video. We'll see, right? Maybe I could move the microphone more into line with my face. That would help. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, I've seen a bunch of videos that have done this. I'm not going to do quite to the extent that other people have, partially just because I don't have the time to do all that stuff. But I want to talk to you about some of the records I most wish would be pressed on vinyl. Some of the records I most wish would be pressed on vinyl. And we're going to jump right into it because I've got about 15 that I most wish would be pressed on vinyl. So let's dive in. Okay, so I've seen a lot of people do this kind of video and do a really awesome job where they have the album cover up and then they have like the color way that they would get it pressed, whether they would get it splatter or swirl or smoke or, translucent or opaque or all those kinds of things. And they're honestly amazing videos. I love Megan Wakefield did some of those, Austin Pearley. So shout out to both of them. I'm not going to do that. And the main reason is I don't totally know how, and I don't have the time to learn how right now. Just trying to do this video has already been a bit of a challenge this morning. But I am going to talk about what albums I want pressed. Now, some of these have already been pressed before. Some of them I don't think have ever been pressed. Some of them I don't know. But these are the albums I would most like to see pressed on vinyl. So for me, probably my number one pick is this album right here. So this album was, I think it might have been like an extra disc when you purchased a Mark, a Mission, a Brand, a Scar. I don't think you could ever purchase this on its own, but I could be wrong. But this is Dashboard Confessional REM album covers. This is a show that aired on MTV2. It was about a 45-minute show. You can actually watch the whole thing on YouTube. But what they were doing is this was something that would take place at, I think it took place at Arlene's Grocery in New York. I think it, like all the episodes did. And I don't know how many episodes there were. But they would ask a popular band of the time to cover an album by a band that they really loved, an album that really meant a lot to them. And Dashboard Confessional chose to cover REM's Automatic for the People. Now, I knew a little bit about REM, but I didn't know much about them. And this performance by Dashboard Confessional, who was at the time one of my favorite bands and still is, made me love REM so much. So, not only did it make me love REM songs, it made me love Automatic for the People, but it was really cool too because Michael Stipe was on the special and he came and talked about his songs, his albums, but he also then performed hands down with Dashboard Confessional, which was super cool. And so it was cool to hear Michael Stipe's take on that. He has such a unique and special and beautiful voice. I would love to see this pressed on vinyl. I think obviously it would be cool to have some of that purple that they have on Michael Stipe's face and the sort of bluish green that's on Chris Caraba's face as the colors of the vinyl. And I would absolutely, this would be a great album, I think, to be like a record store day exclusive because it's such a unique kind of niche thing. I think this would be really cool to get. But if you do it, please press enough that I can get some. So for my favorite bands, I've been trying really hard to collect all of their music. And Dashboard Confessional is one that I've had a little bit more of a challenge with. And I do hope to one day get all of their albums, but at the very least, brief pause for a coughing fit. At the very least, this album is one of the only earlier albums that I don't have. I know this one's been pressed before, but I don't have it. And when Dashboard repressed a lot of their albums, this was the one in that sort of time frame that did not get a repress. So Dashboard Confessional, a Mark, a Mission, a Brand, a Scar is definitely one I need to have in the collection. I don't know what color would work on this. I mean, obviously you could have a lot of gray and black in it because that's what the cover has. But I would just love to have this in the collection. Another one of my all-time favorite bands is the Decemberists. I was lucky enough to get to see them in concert at Radio City Music Hall in 2008 or 9, somewhere in there, with the Robin Hitchcock opening. And they did kind of two sets, and one of their sets was like All the Hazards of Love. Now, at this point, I have their entire discography of full-length studio albums. Thanks very much to St. Marie Records, my favorite record store. They've done a really phenomenal job of helping me to get a hold of the whole collection. The only album I don't have is The Hazards of Love, which is the only one that's really impossible to get a hold of right now. So, of course, I definitely would love to get this album. It's got some special memories for me, and I would love to have it pressed. And obviously, on this one, I mean, just solid black vinyl would be great. I think a lot of times Decemberists mainly do solid black vinyl. I did get like a brown vinyl on their newer album, but either a black vinyl or maybe the color of the letters would be great. So another one of my favorite bands, there's obviously a trend here, is Death Cab for Cutie. And for Death Cab for Cutie as well, I've got all of their full-length studio albums. The only full-length studio album I don't currently have by Death Cab for Cutie is this one, Kintsugi. And it's not an album I know very well. I know a lot of their albums, but I don't know this one very well at all. And so I want to fix that. I've loved everything I've heard by this band. And I've recently, because of Saint Marie helping me get a hold of some of the albums, completed my discography of them except for this album. So I'd love to see another copy of this album pressed. So MXPX is one of my all-time favorite bands as well. This is a band that I mean, I have their logo tattooed on me. This is the first tattoo I got. This was the first band that I really felt like was my music that I had found for me. And so they hold a very special place. Now, not too long ago, we had an MXPX box set that collected their first 10 studio albums. It's a beautiful thing that the band put together along with unoriginal vinyl, and I am so glad that I own it. And I have a lot of additional vinyl by MXPX, including on the cover and some My Carrera original albums, plus albums they finished after the box set. What I don't have is this album and the one I'm going to talk about next. So At the Show was a deeply loved live album that MXPX put out. I think this came out around the time of Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. MXPX was going through some label changes. This was a way for them to fulfill their obligations with their contract to Tooth and Nail Records. But it is a really great live album. And anyone who's a big MXPX fan really wants a copy of this. Now, I do believe this album has been pressed, but it was a long time ago, and it's something that most people either don't have or are not willing to spend that much money on. As much as I love MXPX, I don't think I could spend as much as it would take to get a copy of this album. So I would love to get a copy of this repressed for me. This is another one of those that may have been used to fulfill MXPX's album obligations to Tooth and Nail Records. It's a collection of a lot of songs they had recorded previously while they were working on other albums and some additional material. I think of it a lot as like sort of a B-sides album, but really there's not any tracks here that feel like B-sides. They're all bangers. There's like 32 songs or 31 or 32 songs on this album. This album is maybe the album I sang the most. I remember a lot of days of going to get on the school bus in the morning to go to high school and having this on my headphones and singing it as loud as I possibly could. Um, I think for this one, we need some sort of a splatter, right, with the orange and red splatter. Now, this was recently pressed as a bootleg, and I didn't pick it up. I'm sure I still could, but for me, uh, I really don't want to purchase bootleg materials because I want to support the band. And I know that some of the other people who are really big fans of MXPX, they've kind of justified it by saying, until MXPX presses this is the only way we can get a hold of it. We're going to get a hold of it. But when MXPX presses it, we'll buy it again. I'm going to just wait and hope that one day MXPX will press it themselves, and I definitely plan on getting a hold of it then. Now, this one's a little different. So this is the Life Aquatic studio sessions with Seu Jorge. This album is some sessions that were recorded during the making of the soundtrack for The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which is a Wes Anderson film. It's a really phenomenal film. I really love it. And the soundtrack is what really, really captured my attention. Because these songs by Seu Jorge, they're these like really soft, mellow, chill, bossa nova type versions of David Bowie songs sung in Portuguese. And in a way, it sort of introduced me to David Bowie more than I had been introduced before. And it also just made me love, another pause for a coughing fit, made me love Brazilian bossa nova, samba, that kind of music more. My family heritage on my dad's side we're from Portugal. So I do feel like a connection to things that are in Portuguese. And so to have this opportunity to listen to these beautiful songs, connect with the great music of David Bowie, connect with this great Wes Anderson movie, and connect with some Portuguese language, some heritage connections. I really love it. I've seen this on bootleg as well. I've never seen like an official pressing of it, but I would really love to see that. Okay, another maybe surprising one, if you don't know me very well, is this one. So I do love Taylor Swift. I am a Swiftie. I'm not like to the extent where I'm like looking at all the clues and trying to figure all that stuff out. I think it's fun, and I love that people do that. I'm just not that connected to it, but I do love her music. My wife and I have loved her since her very first album. Um, we have most of her albums on vinyl. The only two we don't have are the two that she hasn't repressed Taylor's versions of. But this is an album I would love to see, and I'd really love to see like a deluxe version of this, because this album was an album that came out on Target's at Target. It was just a small, excuse me, a small little CD EP. Pardon me. Um, there's like two originals on here and a lot of traditional Christmas songs as well. And the two originals are two of my favorite Christmas songs. They're so beautiful. I make a Christmas mix every single year, and very early on, I used both of those original songs by her. Now, at this point, we have a couple of additional songs that could go on a Christmas mix that Taylor's done. And so I would love to see like a deluxe edition with this and maybe some, versions of those songs on there as well, like Christmas Tree Farm and so on. That would be amazing. This is another one I think would be a really fantastic record store day exclusive, maybe specifically for Black Friday. I think it would be great to see this as a record store day Black Friday exclusive. All right, so another one of my favorite musicians is a guy named Glenn Hansard. Glenn Hansard started in a band called The Frames. He was also in a couple of movies. Back in the day, he was in a movie called The Commitments. Then he performed in a group called the Swell Season, and those two main musicians, Glenn and Marketa Erglova, were in a movie called Once, won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Glenn's continued to make original music on his own, as well as the Swell Season has recently gotten back together. This is a Frames album. Not too long ago, Cladog Records out of Ireland repressed the first three Frames albums to vinyl. But there's still two or three albums that have not been pressed or haven't been pressed in a really long time, and this is one of them. And so I would love to see this one get pressed. Another one, I believe, is called Burn the Maps. I don't think that one's been pressed either. So really both of those I'd love to see get pressed to vinyl records so that I could complete my Glenn Hansard collection. All right, so this one I've got word could be happening sometime this year. I probably just pointed in the completely wrong direction, but whatever. This one, I got word could be happening sometime this year. I would really love that. This one has been pressed before, but it hasn't been in a long time. So this is Derek Webb, Mockingbird. Now, Derek Webb started in a band called Caedmon's Call, which was sort of a Christian college rock band. And then Derek kind of split off and started making some of his own music where he was really kind of starting to question some things in the church, some things related to faith. Um, and he started making his own music, which I think was deeply moving and opened some doors for people to also question and allowed people to be authentic in their faith and say, hey, I'm maybe having some issues with some aspects of my faith. Derek continues to make music. He is about to put out a brand new 9-song album later this year. Recently, he put out an album called The Jesus Hypothesis. He put out a couple singles after that. Mockingbird is the album that first captured my heart. So Derek helped start a website called Noise Trade, and he put this album up for free on Noise Trade. And back then, getting free music was like amazing. So I got this whole album. I listened to it. I loved it. And then I really dove deeply into Derek Webb's music. I've had the privilege of meeting Derek once. He's a really incredibly nice guy, and I really wish him all the success. I would love to get his whole catalog on vinyl, but if I could get one album that I don't have, this is the one. This is another Christian band. This one's really kind of folky, singer-songwritery. This band holds a special place in my heart because the first concert I ever went to with my now wife was Waterdeep. Now, she'll tell you the story, and the story is that I screwed up because I invited her to this concert and then I sort of ignored her. It was not intentional. I'm one of those people that if I'm kind of hosting an event, if I invited people, I feel like I have to be interacting with everybody. And so, although I was very interested in her at the time, I was trying to be a good host. Plus, we had some friends get in a car accident before we got there. Um, I love this band. I love this album. I love the songs on this album. I love their voices. There's a song on here called Everyone's Beautiful that is maybe one of my favorite songs. I used to put it on a mix, and right after Everyone's Beautiful, it would kind of lead into the song Frail by Jars of Clay, and those two really went well together. This is one I don't think will ever happen, but I would love, absolutely love to see this album on vinyl. It is a deeply important album to me, both personally, but also uh, there's this connection to my romance with my wife, who, we've been together almost 23 years. And so anything that's special to us as a couple will be special forever. So the quality of this picture is probably pretty terrible. Sorry, it's probably over there. The quality of this picture is probably pretty terrible. This album is a local band called My Space Coaster, which a lot of people that grew up here know this band. They were an incredibly great emo. It was like kind of Midwest emo kind of vibes. The lead singer, John LaMonica, went on to be a part of some other great musical projects and have his music in movies and stuff like that, and sort of has vanished in a way. But My Space Coaster was the first local band that I was really into, and I was like, if they're playing, I'm going to be there. This is their first EP. It got released a couple different ways. It got released independently like this, where it was just their 5 tracks. I think it's like 5 tracks. It also got released as a split EP with another local band called Society's Finest. Um, I love this album. The 5 songs on here are absolutely amazing. They do not do justice to how good the band was live, but they are still really great. And I would love to see this pressed on like a 10-inch or something. Also, this one will never happen, but I would love it. We're getting pretty close to the end. This one here, Reliant K's self-titled album. So I feel like Reliant K is not wanting to do this one. They've repressed a lot of their albums, especially I think SML XL vinyl has helped them to repress most of them. This album they've stayed away from. And I think that the reason is probably because there's a song on here called Marilyn Manson. And it's a very judgy Christian song. It says Marilyn Manson ate my girlfriend. She once believed in God. Now she believes in sin. Like as if the fact that you like Marilyn Manson's music means that you're a heathen and going to hell or something. It's ludicrous. And I know that the band doesn't believe that at all anymore. So maybe that's the reason that they're not pressing it. And I totally get that. But there are a lot of really great songs on this album too. And for those of us who are big Reliant K fans, and especially those of us who have progressed in our faith, like Reliant K has, um, I assume they have, based on things that I know about them, then I would say that like we're able to sort of like separate that track out and just ignore it, or also like laugh at it as like the innocent naivete. So I would love to see this one pressed on vinyl. I've got everything else Reliant K's done. Their music, like back in the day when I was listening to punk rock, like my favorite Christian punk bands, it was going to be MXPX, Reliant K, and Craig's Brother. Those were my 3 favorites. So I would absolutely love to see this pressed on vinyl. And I'm just going to pause here because as I said that, I just realized I don't have on this like video at all Craig's Brother Homecoming. But yeah, Craig's Brother Homecoming, put that on this list. That's another one that I absolutely love. One of my all-time favorite albums, and I would desperately love to see that get repressed. Now, for this one, I have a suggestion. I think that this should be a double album. And so some of you guys are going to look at this and immediately be like, oh my God, no, never, don't do this. And then some of you will be like, I absolutely have to have this. So if you were in the Christian scene growing up and you were into punk, ska, hardcore, there were 3 main ska bands, the Supertones, Five Iron Frenzy, and the Insiders. Recently, the first 2 Supertones albums have been pressed, which are the 2 that I was most like, I have to get those. We had a Five Iron Frenzy box set, so I've got pretty much everything by Five Iron Frenzy. But for the Insiders, I don't think we have anything on vinyl. And while I would love to get everything, because I did really love the Insiders and I still appreciate their music, pause again for another coughing fit. These 2 albums specifically, Scalaluja and Scalaluja 2, for some people, they're criminal offenses. These are ska or ska punk or punk versions of traditional worship songs. The kinds of songs you would have heard if you went to like a Baptist youth camp, a lot of them. But they had like a deep, like for a lot of us in the scene at the time, there was something special about this. It married our faith to our music in a way that hadn't been done before. It didn't feel like it was done for profiteering or for, just a cash grab. It felt like it was done because the insiders really wanted to worship. There's a nostalgia value here, and I still really appreciate these songs. And to be honest, some of the versions of these songs are really beautiful or really fun. So I would love to see these pressed to vinyl. I think if you were going to do anything by the insiders, these would be the ones that would sell the best. And so I think you would have to do these first to maybe fund some of those other early insiders albums. This is my last one, and this one I think should be a box set because there's 2 volumes of the soundtrack, and they both have a lot of tracks. There's also an EP, which I didn't even put the cover on here. But to be able to have all of that in a box set would be amazing. Now, if you're a big Cameron Crowe fan, which I am, many of Cameron Crowe's movies have impacted me on a deeply personal level. Almost Famous is one of those. Almost Famous has this amazing version of the soundtrack that's called the Uber Deluxe version, which ranges in cost between $160 and like $250. One day I will own that. I do have a version of the soundtrack right now, but it's nowhere near as expansive. Elizabethtown is a movie that was definitely not praised to the extent that Almost Famous was, but another movie that had deeply profound meaning and impact in my life. It's a movie that's about grieving the loss of your father, grieving your own personal failures, and in a lot of ways, I've resonated deeply with this movie over the years. I would love a box set of this soundtrack. It would make me ecstatic. Cameron Crowe, come on, man, give it all to me. All right, so that's about 15 albums, although I did come up with a 16th in the middle of that I would love to see pressed or repressed to vinyl. They would make my year so much better. One of them ended up being a double album and one a box set, but you know, the heart wants what it wants. What are some of the albums that you would love to see pressed or repressed to vinyl? Please like, comment, subscribe, all the stuff you're supposed to do with these videos to help other people to see them. And thanks for stopping by.